There's a strange feeling a lot of people can't quite name. It's not panic, it's not failure, it's not even stress in the usual sense. It's that quiet confusion that shows up when you look at your life and think, by every logical measure, this should be working. You're employed, you're educated, you're responsible, you're doing what adults are supposed to do. And yet, everything feels tight. Not dramatic, not catastrophic, just constantly close. Close to running out, close to falling behind, close to one bad month turning into a bad year. And that feeling doesn't come from laziness or bad decisions. It comes from how modern life quietly rewired what enough even means. Let me explain. Because this isn't really a money problem. It's a design problem. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here's the strange paradox of modern success. The more stable your life looks from the outside, the more fragile it often becomes underneath. That sounds backwards, but stay with me. We've built a world where stability is measured by appearances. Steady income, respectable job titles, predictable routines, well-structured schedules. But real stability isn't about predictability. It's about absorption capacity. How much disruption can your life take before it starts breaking apart? Most people never ask that question. They assume that if everything is running smoothly, things are fine. But smooth systems are often the most brittle. Think about how people actually experience financial pressure. It rarely shows up as one big disaster. It shows up as accumulation. A slightly higher monthly obligation here, a slightly longer commute there, a few more automatic payments layered on top, a little less time to rest, a little more dependence on convenience. None of it feels dangerous in isolation, but together they form something subtle and powerful, a life that only works under perfect conditions, and perfect conditions don't exist. Here's a quick reset before we go further. This isn't about blaming choices. This isn't about minimalism or guilt or cutting lattes, and this definitely isn't about saying people should just work harder. This is about understanding how modern systems quietly push people toward maximum utilization, and maximum utilization feels efficient until something goes wrong. Modern life doesn't reward slack. Slack looks irresponsible. Slack looks wasteful. Slack looks like you're not using your full potential, so people remove it. They optimize schedules. They optimize budgets. They optimize careers. They optimize housing. They optimize time. And optimization feels smart until you realize you optimized away your margin. Here's the insight most people miss. Margin doesn't feel productive, but it's what makes systems resilient. Airlines don't schedule planes at 100% capacity all the time because one delay would cascade into chaos. Power grids don't run at full output constant because a small surge would cause failure. Your body doesn't operate at peak exertion 24/7 because that leads to injury and burnout. People are encouraged to do exactly that. So we end up living lives that look strong, but behave like glass, strong when untouched, shattered when stressed. And stress doesn't need to be dramatic. It can be a medical appointment that turns into a diagnosis, a family member who suddenly needs support, a job that becomes emotionally unsustainable, a child who needs more attention than expected, a company that quietly restructures. None of these are rare events. They're normal life events. But modern lifestyles aren't built to accommodate normal life. They're built for uninterrupted output. Let's zoom in on something psychological for a moment. The human brain is very bad at sensing gradual fragility. We're wired to notice sharp threats, not slow erosion. So when pressure builds slowly, we adapt instead of resist. We normalize exhaustion. We normalize tightness. We normalize always needing the next paycheck to arrive on time. And because nothing breaks immediately, we assume nothing is wrong. That's how traps work. They don't feel like traps while you're stepping into them. Another reset, because this is important. If you're listening to this and feeling a knot in your chest, that's not anxiety. That's recognition. And recognition is the first moment of control. Now here's where the story usually goes wrong. People think the solution is more income, more efficiency, more side hustles, more optimization. But adding more output to a system that already lacks margin doesn't create security. It creates dependence. You become dependent on maintaining intensity, and intensity is not a stable resource. Here's a reframing that changes everything. Security doesn't come from how much you earn. It comes from how forgiving your life is. A forgiving life allows mistakes, allows rest, allows pauses, allows redirection.
one. An unforgiving life demands constant performance. Guess which one produces long-term stability? Think about this. Two people can earn the same amount of money and experience radically different levels of safety. The difference isn't income, it's commitment rigidity. One life has room to breathe. The other is locked into fixed expectations that cannot bend. And when life can't bend, it breaks. So what does flexibility actually look like in practice? It looks boring. It looks unimpressive. It looks like saying no to things you technically qualify for. And that's the key idea most people miss. They build lives that require their future selves to stay healthy, stay employed, stay emotionally intact, stay uninterrupted forever. That's not planning. That's gambling. Let's talk about the emotional side for a moment, because pressure doesn't just affect finances, it affects relationships. When life has no slack, conversations become transactional. Time together feels rushed. Rest feels guilty. Small problems feel bigger than they are. Not because people are failing, but because the system they're living inside has no buffer. Everything becomes high stakes when there's no room for error. Here's a subtle but powerful pattern interrupt. What if the goal isn't to make life easier, but to make it less fragile? Easier depends on circumstances. Less fragile depends on structure. One bad week shouldn't threaten your entire system. If it does, the system isn't strong. It's stretched. Now let's flip the narrative. What if success isn't about maximizing lifestyle, but minimizing required performance? What if wealth isn't about how much comes in, but how much pressure you've removed? That's a very different game, and it leads to very different decisions. People who quietly win at this game don't look flashy. They don't always upgrade immediately. They don't always keep pace socially. They don't optimize for appearance. They optimize for recoverability. If something goes wrong, they don't collapse. They adjust. That's real power. Here's another micro hook. Most people don't fail financially. They fatigue, and fatigue makes everything feel harder than it needs to be. When you're tired, every problem feels urgent. When you're rested, problems feel solvable. Margin buys rest. Rest buys clarity. Clarity buys better decisions. That loop works in your favor or against you. So what's the takeaway? Not a checklist, not a rule, not a formula, just a question worth sitting with. If my life were disrupted tomorrow, not destroyed, just disrupted, how much flexibility would I actually have? Not how much income, not how much hustle, not how impressive it looks, how much room. Because room is what turns chaos into inconvenience instead of catastrophe. Let me leave you with this. Modern life teaches us to equate fullness with success, but systems don't thrive when they're full. They thrive when they have space. Space to absorb shocks, space to adapt, space to rest, space to choose. If your life feels heavy despite doing everything right, that doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're living inside a system that confuses intensity with security. And now that you can see it, you can start designing differently. Not louder, not faster, not bigger, just more forgiving. And that changes everything. If this video helped you see your situation more clearly, hit the like button. It helps this reach people who need it. And if you want more videos that challenge the way we think about money, work, and modern life, subscribe.